You walk into a boardroom. Everyone is staring at the CEO at the head of the table. The agenda is printed. The hierarchy is clear. The org chart says who reports to whom. But here is what you are not seeing. The real decision was made 3 hours ago in a parking lot between two people who do not even have executive titles. The person everyone defers to in the meeting is not the one with the corner office. It is the one who controls the information, the one who knows which projects get funding before they hit the table, the one who has coffee with the CFO every Tuesday morning. You have been lied to about how power works. You were taught that power lives in titles, in authority, in the official structures. You were told to climb the ladder, collect the credentials, wait your turn. Meanwhile, the people who actually run things, the ones pulling the strings, they never bothered with the ladder. They built a web, and you did not even know you were caught in it. Let me be very clear. Formal power, the kind you see on paper, is a theater. It is a performance designed to make the machinery of society look legitimate. But real power operates in the shadows. It lives in the unwritten rules, the informal networks, the silent agreements that nobody talks about but everyone obeys. If you want to understand how the world actually works, you need to stop looking at the stage and start looking backstage. Today we are going to pull back the curtain. We are going to dissect the invisible architecture of influence that governs every organization, every institution, every hierarchy you have ever been part of. And by the end of this, you will never see power the same way again. You will see the strings. And once you see them, you can never go back to being a puppet. The sociologists have a term for this. They call it the informal power structure. It is the hidden layer of influence that operates outside the official hierarchy. While everyone is busy respecting the chain of command, the informal structure is where the real negotiations happen, where alliances are formed, where decisions are actually made. In one study, researchers analyzed organizational networks and found that the most influential positions within each network were not always held by people in formal leadership roles. The individuals with the most connectivity, the ones who appeared in the operational range of the most employees, those were the real power brokers. Think about your own workplace. There's always that person who is not the boss, but somehow knows everything first. They are the one people go to for advice. They are the one who can get things done with a single phone call. They are the gatekeeper, the hub, the unofficial leader. And here's what makes this terrifying. These informal networks create a hidden layer of influence that complicates every formal system. Promotions, contracts, even disciplinary actions, they are determined by connections, by who you know, by whether you are inside the circle or outside it. The handbook says one thing. The reality operates on a completely different frequency. Max Weber, the sociologist who basically invented the study of power, defined it simply. Power is the ability to exercise one's will over others. But what he understood, what most people miss, is that this ability does not come from a job title. It comes from control. Control over resources, control over information, control over access. When you control what people need, you control people. Period. Look at how this plays out in the real world. There are 7 types of power that psychologists have identified. Coercive power, the ability to punish. Reward power, the ability to grant benefits. Legitimate power, authority that comes from position. Expert power, influence through knowledge. Referent power, influence through charisma. Informational power, control over critical data. And connection power, the ability to link people to resources. Now here's the key insight. Most people assume that legitimate power, the official authority, is the strongest form. They are wrong. The most dangerous forms of power are the ones that do not require a title. Expert power makes you indispensable. Informational power makes you a gatekeeper. Connection power makes you the bridge between what people want and what people need. When you possess these, your formal position becomes almost irrelevant. You are operating at a frequency that the org chart cannot map. Let's talk about how this looks in practice. There was a study where college students played supervisors managing workers. Half the supervisors were given only legitimate power. The other half were given both reward and coercive power. The ones with extra power used it constantly. They threatened more. They contacted workers more frequently. And here's the brutal part. Even though the workers performed equally well in both conditions, the supervisors with more power rated the workers more negatively, were less interested in meeting them, and believed the only reason the workers performed was to avoid punishment. Power corrupts perception. When you have power, you start to believe everyone else is performing out of fear or self-interest. You stop seeing their humanity. You stop seeing their competence. You see tools. And this is why informal power structures are so insidious. The people operating in them often do not even realize how much they have twisted the reality around them. But the shadow structure is not always visible. That is the point. It is called shadow management for a reason. These are individuals without formal roles who wield real influence, acting as hidden decision makers. They thrive in informality. They cannot be held accountable because they do not officially exist in the power structure. You cannot fight what you cannot see. In organizations across the world, from corporations to governments, informal power structures such as tribal affiliations, political connections, and unofficial alliances create hidden layers that pressure people to divert resources toward personal or group interests. A procurement officer awards contracts to unqualified firms because they are connected to powerful informal actors. A CEO hires based on loyalty rather than merit. The formal system says one thing. The shadow system delivers another outcome entirely. And this is not some conspiracy theory. This is documented reality. Researchers studying power networks have shown that informal networks are often driven by key influencers who are not in leadership positions but hold significant sway over their peers. One company had a brilliant strategy that was struggling to gain traction. Employees were hesitant to commit despite clear directives. When they mapped the informal networks, they identified a few key influencers, people not part of official leadership who held massive influence. Getting their buy-in created a ripple effect. The strategy accelerated overnight. That is the power of the grapevine. That is the power of the shadow. Now let's go deeper. Why does this informal structure exist in the first place? Because formal structures are slow, rigid, and blind to human nature. Formal hierarchy assumes people follow rules because rules exist, but people follow incentives. They follow relationships. They follow trust. Informal networks can speed up decision-making in ways formal structures cannot. When you need something done quickly, you do not send a memo up the chain of command. You text the person who knows the person who has the authority. Informal channels are faster, more flexible, more human. But they are also more dangerous, because they operate without oversight, without transparency, without accountability. A decision made in a hallway conversation leaves no paper trail. A favor exchanged over coffee is invisible to auditors. The shadow structure can be incredibly efficient, but it can also be incredibly corrupt. Here is where it gets darker. Power operates through control of resources and the ability to impose sanctions, both positive and negative. But the most efficient form of power is not punishment that has already happened. It is the anticipation of punishment. Students complete assignments not because they have been punished before, but because they know punishment is possible. This is anticipatory power. The threat maintains order without constant enforcement. In informal structures, this is how influence works. You do not need to punish someone for stepping out of line. You simply let it be known that people who step out of line tend to stop getting invited to important meetings. They stop hearing about opportunities. They stop mattering. The punishment is invisible, plausible deniability intact, but the outcome is the same, compliance. And this reveals a fundamental truth. Power emerges from control over various types of resources, including intangible resources like information, social connections, and cultural knowledge. A tech CEO wields enormous power, not just because of wealth, but because they control information flows, employment opportunities, and technological infrastructure. A mid-level manager who has been at the company for 20 years may have more real influence than a newly hired VP, because they control institutional knowledge, relationships, and access to the decision makers. Power is not about who has the fanciest title. It is about who has the most critical dependencies flowing through them. Let me give you an example of how this operates in corrupt systems. Researchers studying anti-corruption efforts discovered something fascinating and horrifying. When informal power networks face pressure to curb corruption, they instrumentalize anti-corruption institutions to protect the network itself. They appoint allies to oversight positions. They build informal loyalties between the anti-corruption agency and the power network. They limit resources or mandate of the institution. They create formal rules that look good on paper but work to protect network insiders. Outsiders get prosecuted. Insiders get impunity. The rule of law becomes a weapon used selectively. This is how power protects itself. It co-opts the very mechanisms designed to check it. It is brilliant. It is evil. It is everywhere. Now, the question you should be asking is this. If real power operates outside formal rules, how do you recognize it? How do you map the invisible structure? Here is the method. Pay attention to nonverbal cues, body language, facial expressions, and tone of voice. Watch who people defer to in meetings, even if that person is not the highest ranking. Notice who speaks last and whose opinion shifts the room. Observe who has coffee with whom. Track who gets consulted before decisions are announced. These nonverbal signals offer insights into unwritten rules regarding power dynamics, communication styles, and expectations. The person crossing their arms might be signaling disagreement that will sabotage your project later. The person who makes brief eye contact with the CEO before answering your question, that is the person who already knows the real answer. And here is another critical insight. Informal leaders are individuals without formal title or authority who heighten contributions through influence, relationship building, and knowledge and expertise. They are the emergent leaders. They rise to the top of the informal network not because someone promoted them, but because people naturally gravitate to them. They are the hub, the clearinghouse, the person everyone trusts with information. If you want to get something done in an organization, you do not pitch the CEO, you pitch the informal leader. You get them on your side first. Then you let them carry it to the official decision makers. That is how you move through the shadow structure. That is how you turn informal power into formal outcomes. But there is a cost to all of this. Unwritten rules that govern workplaces can be exclusionary to those outside the majority, especially people with historically marginalized identities. When the real rules are invisible, newcomers do not know how to succeed. They follow the employee handbook, they do good work, and they wonder why they are not advancing. Meanwhile, people who look like the existing power structure, who went to the same schools, who play the same sports, who speak the same coded language, they advance effortlessly. Not because they are more competent, because they understand the unwritten rules. Some of these unwritten rules align with behaviors of the majority group, and by design, some people are not supposed to know them. This is how inequality perpetuates. This is how glass ceilings are built. Not with explicit discrimination that can be sued, but with informal networks that operate below the surface. So what do you do with this knowledge? First, stop being naive. Many dedicated, loyal, hard-working people have had their careers derailed by overlooking unwritten corporate rules. Political blind spots at work decrease your influence, impact, and career progression. If you are telling yourself that you do not need to play politics, that your work speaks for itself, you are setting yourself up for failure. Your work does not speak for itself. People speak for your work. And if you have not built relationships with the people who matter in the informal structure, your work will be invisible, no matter how brilliant it is. Second, map the network. Identify the informal leaders. Notice who has coffee with whom. Observe the flow of information. Who gets consulted before announcements? Who do people go to for advice? These are your targets. These are the relationships you need to build. Third, become a gatekeeper yourself. A billionaire stranded alone on a desert island has no power because there's no one to influence. Power is fundamentally relational. It only exists between people. So position yourself at the intersection of critical flows. Be the person who connects people to resources. Be the person who has expertise others need. Be the person who controls information that matters. Do not seek titles. Seek dependencies. When people depend on you for something they cannot get elsewhere, you have power that no org chart can take away. Fourth, understand that power is not evil. It is neutral. Power can be seen as evil or unjust, but the exercise of power is accepted as endemic to humans as social beings. The use of power does not require coercion or force. It can be collaborative. It can be empowering. The question is not whether you have power. The question is what you do with it. Are you using it to protect yourself and advance your interests? Are you using it to help others? Are you using it to change broken systems? The tool is neutral. Your intention determines the outcome. Fifth, be aware that powerful people are prone to take risky, inappropriate, or unethical decisions and often overstep their boundaries. If you gain power, whether formal or informal, you must actively guard against the corruption of your own perception. People with power tend to use more coercive tactics. Increase social distance between themselves and subordinates. Believe non-powerful individuals are untrustworthy, and devalue the work of less powerful individuals. This is not a moral failing. It is a psychological phenomenon. Power changes how you see people. You must fight that change. You must maintain empathy. You must remember what it felt like to be powerless. And here is the final, most dangerous insight. Power is not merely about coercion or domination. It also involves consent, negotiation, and sometimes even resistance. The French philosopher Michel Foucault understood this better than anyone. Power is not simply something individuals or institutions possess and wield over others. It is embedded in social relationships and practices. Power operates through knowledge and discourse, shaping how people understand themselves and the world. This means power is not just repressive, it is productive. It creates norms, identities, ways of being. The unwritten rules you follow, those are not just constraints. They are the architecture of your reality. They define what seems possible, what seems normal, what seems right. When you internalize the informal structure, you stop needing external enforcement. You police yourself. You limit yourself. You become both the prisoner and the guard. This is the ultimate form of power. Not the power to punish you for breaking the rules. The power to make you believe the rules are natural, inevitable, the way things have always been. When you no longer question why the informal leader has influence, when you no longer ask why certain people advance while others do not, when you accept the invisible structure as reality, you have been conquered, not by force, by consent. And breaking that consent, seeing the structure for what it is, that is the first step toward freedom. That is the first step toward real power. Not the power to dominate others. The power to define your own reality. So let me ask you this. Are you a player or a piece? Are you moving through the informal structure with intention, building relationships, positioning yourself at critical intersections, becoming a gatekeeper of resources and information? Or are you sitting at your desk, following the employee handbook, wondering why hard work is not enough, waiting for someone to notice your competence and hand you the promotion you deserve? Because nobody is coming. The formal structure will never give you power. You have to take it, not through aggression. Not through manipulation, through awareness, through relationships, through strategic positioning in the invisible architecture that actually runs the world. The org chart is a fairy tale. The real map is drawn in coffee meetings, in hallway conversations, in who texts whom after hours. The real map is drawn in trust, in favors, in the accumulation of social capital that cannot be quantified on a performance review. If you want to understand how power actually works, stop reading the handbook. Start reading the room. Watch who defers to whom. Notice whose opinion ends debates. Track the flow of information like you would track the flow of money. Because in the shadow structure, information is money. Relationships are currency, and influence is the only thing that matters. You have been taught to respect authority, to follow the rules, to wait your turn. Meanwhile, the people who actually have power, they wrote the rules, they control the turn order, and they are not playing the same game you think you are playing. They are 3 moves ahead, operating on a chessboard you cannot see, until now. Now you see it. Now you see the informal networks. You see the shadow management. You see the unwritten rules that determine who rises and who is left behind. The question is, what are you going to do with that knowledge? Are you going to keep pretending the formal structure is real? Or are you going to step into the shadows and learn how to navigate the web? The choice is yours. But understand this. Ignorance is not innocence. Ignorance is vulnerability. And in a world where real power operates outside the official channels, the naive and the noble get crushed by the same invisible forces. You can call it unfair. You can call it corrupt. You can call it whatever you want. But you cannot change the rules if you do not first understand how the game is actually played. This is how power works. Not in theory, in reality. And reality does not care about your ideals. It only cares about who understands the structure and who does not. Be the one who understands. Be the one who sees. Be the one who moves through the informal channels with precision and purpose. Because the people who control your career, your opportunities, your future, they are already doing it. The only question is whether you are going to stay blind or start seeing. If you are ready to stop being a piece and start becoming a player, if you are ready to understand the invisible architecture that governs every hierarchy you are part of, then you know what to do. Subscribe, not because I need your validation. Subscribe because you are done waiting for permission to exist in a structure that was never designed for your success. Welcome to the real game.